Lovely. Welcome back, listeners, to Human Edge podcast, the show where we talk what it really takes to build workplaces and where human can thrive, not just survive. Today's guest is someone I've been wanting to really talk to for a while, and we are finally here. Dr. Tessa Bailey is a pioneer organizational psychologist and the director of the Opus Centre, where she helps large, complex organizations rethink leadership, culture, and performance through a deep human lens. Welcome, Tessa. Welcome to Human Edge podcast. And I want to kind of just dive straight in. When you look at the state of work right now, what is the story or the moment that most worries you about how people are really doing at work?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you, listeners. I think anybody who's in a work environment understands that there's going to be a level of expectation with work pressure, how hard and fast you have to work, do you have enough time to get your work done? But it does seem with the increase in the cognitive and emotional demands in our work environments that we haven't quite appreciated that you still need to pace those out. And just like you have limited amount of physical energy, you do have limited amount of cognitive and emotional resources. The other thing is a lot of workers are coming into the workplace already feeling quite exhausted. There's a lot of external factors and a lot of other drains on our cognitive and emotional resources. So when we see that isn't being managed in the workplace, it's not that we can remove them all, but I'm worried that we're not understanding how these factors are impacting mental health. And that also impacts productivity, impacts motivation. So we need to address these psychosocial factors so workers can be healthy, productive, and thrive.
And so what have you found to be some of the key things some people that are really doing well are doing to really address those things? As you mentioned, it's quite a complex situation because I'm Anastasia coming to work. I'm a mother at home. I'm a wife. There's so many other things, but there's expectation that I still have to perform at work. So what are the people that are really doing well? What is it that they're doing?
Well, acknowledging that every human comes into the workplace with a level of health, just like with their general physical health. Like with their physical health, maybe sometimes they're struggling with a sore wrist or ankle or a cold, or they're tired. And sometimes with their mental health, they might be struggling with external factors as well. Now, we can think about how we can reasonably support people with their health, whether it's physical or psychological. Whether or not you can make minor adjustments for minor factors on the day-to-day. If there is a major health concern, you might make some more major adjustments, how you generally support workers. But what's really good is when I see leaders understand that you can have expectations. There should be shared expectations of your individual KPIs and what you need to achieve, or team goals, or setting milestones and targets, and then matching resources and supports for that worker. Understanding that might change a bit if they're having a bad day or a bad week, if their mental health is being impacted. But ignoring that doesn't help, just like if you ignored somebody's physical health symptoms. So actually knowing that somebody's mental health is valuable, like physical health, that supporting them in general supports them in the workplace, and addressing those work-related factors. So leaders there's a few tips, like not trying to diagnose if you see symptoms, but willing to have a respectful conversation. That when you're talking about performance, you're allowing that person to share if there are other factors that could be contributing. So acknowledging the really complex emotional demands or project task demands in the workplace, rather than just saying it's part of the job. So leaders who proactively acknowledge these things, have their own emotional intelligence, role model that, get the best out of their workers, and as well as their organisation, their teams, and all of their productivity outcomes as well.
Amazing. And I want to rewind it a little bit back to how you actually came to do the work. So may I just ask, what drew you to the work of organizational psychology? What drew you into that?
I could see that there were factors in work environments impacting mental health, and there was increasing knowledge and language around the really obvious ones, trauma and violence and bullying and harassment. But then trying to create change around those factors, how you manage the risk on the day-to-day, I could see that there were these key indicators. We'd look at data and you could see key indicators around a lot of things around leadership, senior priority for mental health, imbalance with productivity, how workers perceive that there are systems trying to prevent psychological or social hazards in the work environment, and workers feeling confident to raise their concerns, leaders and organisations responding appropriately. When you could see that being done well, you could see better health, like lower levels of distress, depression, exhaustion, as well as more innovation, more creativity. You see reductions in turnover, sickness absence, you see less presenteeism. So it's seeing that in the data gave us confidence to try to apply in workplaces, teaching leaders how to do that, organisations having systems, as well as the workers, individual at that level, how they interact with each other as well.
So you've done a PhD in psychological safety. What surprised you in the data more than you already knew when you went really deep into the work? What surprised you?
Sure. How much we were able to predict a worker's self-reported productivity. I knew that all of those factors I was talking about, like good quality leadership predicts health outcomes, workers are directly impacted with their health. I knew that you need consistent, good, safe psychological safety to have good health outcomes. I didn't realize how much workers withdraw their productivity as a way of coping. So withdraw their professional efficacy or become disengaged or detached. So the amount that it affects motivation, we would see that if you change health, you could see a change. If you change lead indicators, work-related factors, you could see that change in health over time, 10%, 15%. There's a lot of factors contributing to somebody's health, right? Outside of work, all of that. But the motivation in the workplace, you can see that jump sometimes 70% when you're managing the work-related factors as best as reasonably practicable, which is also a legal requirement. But when you do that, workers feel more engaged. When they have more autonomy, they've got more self-efficacy, better self-esteem, when they can feel the goals are achievable, when they take a moment to share that, when they're recognised, rewarded, where their mental health matters, when they're having a bad day, that things can be adjusted, or they can seek additional support if they're being really impacted. And where we see that, we see better productivity. I didn't expect to see such a shift in people just self-reporting how productive they are if they're in a healthy environment versus an unhealthy environment.
Right. And working with organization, and particularly where there are complex issues, what is the part that an organizational culture plays? And what are you seeing? What are the trends that you're seeing in this organizational culture?
When the culture is more reactive than proactive, we don't tend to see as good outcomes. Reactive is still important, like after an issue, like after a major incident, trauma, aggression, how you support somebody, how you help them manage that, how you help them with recovery. It's a bit different for different people. But the proactive, that's where we see it's really key that you're acknowledging what kinds of factors are likely to show up. And it might be trauma, and how are we trying to prevent that exposure as best as reasonably practicable? Are we putting in place things like signs to let customers know that we don't accept unreasonable behaviour? Is there messaging about that? Can somebody ask for a more senior person during periods where there's more tense exchanges in the workplace, or you're expecting a high productivity time of year? Oh, we know that season's coming. Will it get ahead of that rather than waiting till these things occur? So being proactive, and it needs to be at all levels, starting with the seniors acknowledging which are the main factors. Sometimes it is the obvious being exposed to trauma, but sometimes it's the level of work demand or lack of practical resources, like just to get your work done, or too much administrative burden, or lack of appropriate recovery time. So you having an understanding of the particular factors, leaders acknowledging that, your policies and procedures supporting that, so the individuals can manage their workloads with their health and be productive and have good outcomes.
For managers and leaders, particularly managers, I'm not going to use the word leadership, but I dare use the managers here. For people who are managing people,
yes,
with the demands to meet KPIs, and performance manage people, development, that people develop people, their skills, whatever. and really balancing that with psychological safety. Can you talk into that and what you're seeing?
Yeah. Sure. Look, it's a skill. I think it's a skill. I think having a level of emotional intelligence, understanding yourself, your own triggers, that we're all going to have different personalities. We're going to have different preferences, going to have different communication styles, that you can get shared agreement beyond your personality communication style differences on what goals and expectations are, that you can support people with their mental health without, you're not trying to diagnose them, you're not trying to treat their mental health, and you're not responsible for their happiness. You absolutely should address performance and come to shared understanding. And if somebody's struggling at times, what could be reasonable, what could be a support, then knowing that having to have those conversations, how to set those expectations, how to check in, how to review, how to connect people with further supports and resources if what you're doing isn't working. So I think having your own level of emotional intelligence, practicing that for yourself, role modeling that, your own work-life balance, how you support your own mental health, showing people that you can have difficult conversations with civility, with respect. You can raise issues in calm, assertive manners. We can address those concerns earlier rather than waiting till they escalate. And so working with your one-on-one check-ins, individuals and your teams, and remembering to balance with the positives, reminding people we think that they're doing well, we're achieving well. So I think leaders knowing having a bit of that and maybe getting a bit of training. We haven't always had this knowledge in this area. We have been expanding that. And we've been doing well over the last 10 years talking about mental health, not just like ignoring it or being quiet about it or worried it's an illness. Actually, just positive mental health. What makes you feel well? What's your good well-being? When our teams, well, it looks like this. When our individuals are achieving and thriving, they look like this. So balancing that with addressing when concerns arise. Treating it, if you can, in a manner similar to physical health, because health is the whole person, physical and psychological.
And actually, maybe I think we failed to do one thing, to define what is psychological safety. Because there's so many definitions out there and people might just have different ways of looking at it. What is psychological safety?
There are a few definitions. The current popular one for psychological safety, that was popularized a bit more recently by Amy Edmondson. There have been previous versions of it. That's where people feel safe, that there is enough trust, that you could raise your issues, your concerns with civility, with respect. So previously in the past, we've seen that if people mentioned they were struggling with their mental health, there's been a lot of stigma. And we know that people might have actually tried to hide their struggles or not admit that they're struggling with certain levels of workload or types of job demands or work-related factors or leaders or co-workers. So now people will be more willing to, with better psychological safety, raise those issues and then you can address them. It is different to psychosocial safety. Psychosocial safety has been popularized more by Professor Maureen Dollard with Psychosocial Safety Climate. Psychosocial safety in the workplace is about the psychological and social factors at work that we know impact worker health. Certain types of job demands, different types of resources. Leadership support is obviously one of those. So psychological safety is more about your team feeling trust, individuals feeling trust to raise their issues. Psychosocial safety is a bit more about managing your work-related factors to minimize potential harm on health.
Yeah, I work a lot and I play a lot in the healthcare sector, and the psychological claims are up in the billions.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, what are some of the things the healthcare sector could be doing? Because it's almost ridiculous that it's the healthcare and the...
Yeah, they should know, but you find that in industries where they're the experts, the lawyers break the law and nurses don't look after their own health. They know all the knowledge for some reason. Sometimes then they think that it doesn't apply to them. Look, health, education, some of those sectors have some particular cognitive and emotional demands. I know from my work with the health sector, acknowledging them. So I am concerned that we've kind of gone, well, they're just innate, right? And look, to an extent, we know when you're signing up for certain jobs, we're aware that that's going to be cognitively and emotionally demanding. Just like when you sign up for some physically demanding work, it's going to be physically demanding. But we pace the work. We acknowledge where the heavy lifting or the dangerous machinery is. So we need to have policy, practice, procedure around it, supporting it, managing it, pacing it, good recovery, rather than just kind of going, it's part of the job. We don't want to see our healthcare people disassociate, disconnect, be exhausted, no longer try to raise their hand for the resources they need. Some of the things in my recent work, just getting them the practical resources. So not another policy, procedure or portal, not another app, just getting them the practical resources, removing the barriers, acknowledging that, while AI is going to be another tool, just like calculators were for mathematicians, it needs to be able to help the human with their work, like not add to it. So let's acknowledge where the main potential harm is. If it's workload, then that should be the top of the agenda. If it's the emotional demand, which a lot of my health people, they know there's emotional demands in their work, but they're aware. They actually opt in. Part of them enjoys that aspect. But when they don't have enough time to do it properly, when they can't get the right resources or they don't have recovery, then they feel they can't do a quality job. Then they struggle with moral injury for a day, maybe a week. But if that becomes ongoing, that's when we'll see illness. That's where if nothing changes, we'll start to see the more clinical symptoms over time occur. So they've got to get back to treating psychosocial risk management like psychological health. You need to do risk assessment. You should consult with the workers. Not all factors are equal. I want to see priority. Which factors are a priority in your team or across your organization? I then want to see the resources and supports, not just thrown at you, like matched to that risk profile, reviewed in consultation over time. So yeah, getting some good language. I've literally seen risk reduce just where groups in the healthcare have been able to acknowledge these things, talk about it openly, and therefore feel more control and access the resources they need more directly. So,
talking about language and particularly again, coming back to the healthcare sector, and we've been using this terminology, psychological safety, psychological risk, and the managers that are in these roles have been nurses. They were very good nurses. And so they've been promoted to leadership role without real training. And some of these terminologies drive compliance. They really, when they hear them, they're hearing compliance, they're driving compliance. In your work and in the space that you hold, if you are to go to healthcare sector, what is a very basic human language that we could give the leaders in the sector, particularly when they're defining psychological risks? Because if we can understand the risk, we can put the safety.
Yeah. I do think acknowledging them as the work-related factors that they are. So saying, well, what is the cognitive demand in that? Or is it work pressure? Is it workload? Is it the multiple tasks? Like getting it back to that real work-related factors. And then getting a shared consensus of when we're talking about workload, work pressure, work demand, cognitive demand, in your organization, your team, what is that? What does it look like? When we talk about the emotional demands, what is that? What does it look like? So get the context and get a shared agreement. Because you're right, the language changes even between organizations in the same industry. But if there's a shared consensus in your organization, I'm more likely going to see change and risk reduce over time. So you're sometimes getting a shared language, naming these things for what they are, but also doing risk assessment of the psychological constructs you need to be able to create change. Like if we don't have that shared perception of senior priority, we're less likely to see risk reduce regardless of what strategy we put into place. So yeah, get that shared language and get some clear psychosocial risk assessment metrics, preferably lead indicators. Leadership's key. It is key, as well as psychological safety. We're seeing more people are confident raising more of their issues and concerns around psychological health than ever before. We absolutely are. Workplace, home, out there in the world, we're seeing people raise their concerns. What they're not seeing is adequate systems to then respond. And you'll say, our leaders haven't had that training. Well, the organization should have systems in place. Just like if somebody raised a concern for their physical health, what are the systems in place? Who do you go to? How is it addressed? Not all day, every day, No one's got time for that. So is it at the check-in, one-on-one team meeting? Does that actually then do a risk matrix and escalate? Does that then go to a safety people, or is it at the leadership level? Like, where are we addressing these factors like you would concerns for physical safety?
Which is very, very interesting, because I don't know if I've actually sat in a meeting where people are saying, I know, and I work in really high pressured where compliance is a question. And so they're high pressured and there's a lot to do. And we do ask, how are you going? What's happening? But it's very interesting. And that's something for me to take on board, to just think, for that person as a team, what are the things we're emotionally and psychologically struggling with? Because I think we don't name it as we're just asking, how are people going? How are you feeling? And sometimes when
are you okay?
Yeah, if we ask the real question, what are the psychological issues we are really struggling with? We might be able to get an answer. That's actually food for thought, because we look at it, but we're not quite addressing the elephant in the room. And
if those are the factors that have the greatest potential to harm your workers, shouldn't they be getting the top row on the agenda at safety meetings? Like in Australia, you will see more and more psychosocial or the specific work-related factors will appear on meetings now. They're being called out, they're being talked about. And yes, the regulations are driving it and compliance does matter. But the regulations and compliance are following the best practice, the evidence, and the good psychology. So the reason you're meant to have consultation is because it benefits job design, it benefits matching resource supports, it makes people want to engage in the systems, whereas if you just tell people what's going on, like they're not less likely to engage. So consultation is a ticker box for regulation, but it's also good psychology. So yes, are actually, both. Your compliance should reflect what works well, and why you're complying is because it works. So yeah, you should be able to achieve both. Like really, your compliance should be achieving risk reduction, risk management. Yeah, for psychological health.
That is so true. I am a big believer in that people show up at work and can create psychological safety when people feel like they belong. And we've always addressed belonging as a diversity and inclusion agenda. But really, belonging to me is a very basic human need. So if I was to ask you as a psychologist, and specifically organizational psychologist, what is belonging?
Belonging means that you know that there is meaning and purpose beyond yourself. So it's a connection to your community, your environment, your family, your friends. We are absolutely designed to be a social species. It's in our DNA. It's how we've thrived. It's how we spread. It has been due to helping each other. They teach us early on in social psychology that if you broke your femur, like your big leg bone, it's only because we're a social species that you would survive. You could not get food or water and recover and heal unless you had people out there looking around. And now that kind of safety out in your community, when you go out and you interact and you make eye contact and it's pleasant, where people nod, every retail person that you interact with, every bus driver, every co-worker, that signals safety. So that means that if I walked outside and tripped and fell, people are going to help me, not harm me. So we absolutely need that psychological safety. Most people want to feel good, feel competent, feel they're contributing. Most people want to contribute in a meaningful way and see individual results and celebrate them with others. We are designed that way. So you can actually create an environment. It'd be nice if all of our environments, but within the workplace, we can create environments that encourage that. Positive interactions. Tolerance is not enough. We've learnt that. It's in the data. It's not even opinion. Like you can't just tolerate each other. You actually have to acknowledge each other's existence. Aim for positive interactions. You don't have to be best friends all the time. But civility matters. Civility will predict outcomes. Absolutely. Trust will predict outcomes, because then you can raise issues in a respectful manner because you've got that general level of good, positive, pleasant. And then we can address issues as they arise and not be concerned that it breaks our belongingness, our ability to connect with each other and feel safe in our environments. Absolutely. Like, we've known for a long time that loneliness is terrible for you. Like, and I just don't think it's always getting the attention it deserves, but it is a psychological construct that's absolutely necessary, and it's beneficial because if people have that, then they're more likely to engage and be productive. And like, it's a win.
Yeah. I say it to staff all the time. I'm like, I don't expect you to be friends, but we need to be friendly. We just need to respect each other. And then we create an environment. Yeah, we create an environment where we are friendly because we know we're not going to be best friends, and we don't go to work because we want to be best friends, but we need to be respectful and just friendly in a way that, and I say that all the time, trust is in, I can tell you what I really think, not that I have to think it and say, but I can openly, it's safe space. I can talk about it and we can hold space for each other. And obviously that comes with emotional intelligence, which brings me to the next question. You talked a little bit about being grounded in emotional intelligence as a leader. Or then just what you just talked about, it moving from authority leadership to really influence leadership. And that comes because you're able to really quickly adopt as a leader. My question to you is, in the work that you're seeing, what could any leader that is listening to us ground themselves in that emotional intelligence? What are some practical things?
Sure. Like, you can always work on yourself. We are not fully developed just because we turn 18. Our frontal lobe keeps developing until 25 to 28. Nowadays, it's saying 32, and you can still create change later. Admittedly, it does get a bit more difficult to create change, but you can still grow. You can still learn. So you can still take time to challenge yourself. There's ways you can do it, new situations, new people. Actually expose yourself to diversity, some self-reflection. So being willing to question yourself in situations. You can practice emotional agility. That's where you notice your emotions as it arises, and you get this little split second before you respond in any given environment to actually pause. Take a pause when you can to then, and potentially even say, I might need a pause to think about things. So practicing that, regulating your own nervous system, practice what works for you to get yourself back to a place of good health, well-being. And it's different for everybody, whether that's your community, your friends, your art, your hobbies, your sport. So keep working on that. So you can keep working on those kinds of skills, learning about the people in your team. Diversity is good. Diversity predicts good outcomes. So avoid looking for people who, we've got a natural tendency to prefer people who are similar to us. It just, makes us feel like it's easier, and our brain always looks for the easiest. But that means people might not challenge you. See, that's why you want safety. I want people to have a different opinion, because then that's going to represent the others out there. And then where we get shared perception tends to be the gold. Like, I want people to tell me where they think I'm wrong. Literally yesterday I was in a meeting and somebody's like, oh, I don't agree with that. Sorry. And I'm like, no, good. That's why I have you people here. I don't want 4 people there who are all going to group think and tell me what I want to hear. And then we go off on this tangent that doesn't actually fit for purpose. Like, you want that. So as a leader, the data does show, if to an extent you can adapt. I think it's tough, like, on leaders, like, what, you're meant to adapt your style for every single person. Acknowledge that you probably have your own preferences too. Like, I like to give a lot of job control. I don't like to structure my team's work too much, but some of my people prefer more structure. So I remember to check in with them a bit more regularly and go through where they're at a bit more frequently. Others prefer I leave them alone and just, once a week or once every 2 weeks, they'll let me know when they're ready. So to an extent, adapt. And I think you can do that better if you know your own preferences. Yeah. And then to what extent you can work with others. And like you said, you can have differences. It would be, being friends with everybody isn't the point, but treating everybody like a human, acknowledging your own. I love leaders when they apologize and show vulnerability. And I think that role models that we can make mistakes. and without shame, and if you can acknowledge it, and then how do we grow and learn from that? Leaders going out of their way to learn the latest respectful language, how people prefer their names are pronounced in their team, learning their team's kids' names or pets' names. So I think you can keep working on yourself. You can keep working on the positive connections. Show how you want to be able to raise issues, with civility, with respect individually, and how you can address that. And so others will do that. Yeah, you definitely want to role model behaviors you want to see in your workplace. So I think leaders, you can keep working as you're still a human, and you come with your own, personality. You come with your own history. Even I've still got triggers, but the more that you can be aware of that and acknowledge that, and not put it onto others, not project it, but to, cool yourself up on that. But it can take time. It can take practice. It really can.
A lot of self-awareness that needs to go into the work to really, because once I always say this to the teams, that it starts with I. It starts with I. And I do say to my team, and it was really good to hear you say that, because I said to my team, if we're going to sit in a meeting and you're echoing what I'm saying, there's no need for a meeting. I want to hear, it turns out me here. And I hear you challenge me. I want to hear why you don't agree with it, because then it makes
sense. Yes, question it, please. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes self-awareness for you to actually, as a leader, to be able to be part of the team that you say, actually, tell me where I'm wrong.
Right, because our instinct might be to defend our ego, because we might be insecure for all sorts of reasons, but to actually challenge that feeling, rather than, I want to be able to rebut or argue back or say or justify, actually take a moment. That's that emotional agility. Pause, sit with it. Is your discomfort due to your own, you want to hold on to something? Are you being open to new information, learning new things? Life has changed. Like you said, otherwise, why are we having a meeting where you're seeking feedback? So genuinely seeking that feedback and practice at taking that on board. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other key things I was watched as I work with the teams is people need to really employ to their values. And at that point where you're employing people, you need to let them know these are our organizational values. This is a behavior that we expect to come from our values. So people also know the organization they're joining, what's the expectation are before they really join the organization, and they know what is expected. And so when I know that trust is a thing, I know I can safely talk, and it's not something we have on the wall sitting there, because that's what we're really good at. This is our vision, mission, values just on the wall. But are we really living them? Because then that drives organization. Now I have a question. So for leaders actually listening to us, and they've been listening to this conversation, how do they show up on Monday morning? When they show up Monday morning, what are key things that they could start changing to make their environment safe? Practical as a leader. I haven't thought about it.
Yeah. Well, we talk about the third space, and that's where you think about how you're going to show up into the next situation. So sometimes it's from home, your third space before you show up for work. Sometimes it's when you're leaving work, have a third space where you consider your work day, and now I'm moving into my home space. So absolutely, for leaders considering what they want to bring in. For me, for a few examples. So Monday morning, I don't want people to feel a sense of urgency. So I don't want their inbox to be full of emails that I've been sending over the weekend. I don't want to have a meeting at 9 a.m. because I want people to be able to come in, settle in, get their thoughts into flow. Some of the other things I've seen others practice. Blocking out times to throughout the calendar so that people can have focus time. In my team, my people know that in the morning, that's where I get most of my work done. So that's where I don't want to have too much other meetings. But in the afternoon, I'm happy to chat. I know that for my construction and my mining groups, having a leader show up and just check in as a 10-minute huddle with their people, sometimes that makes the difference. I know leaders in the health with their team doing a 10-minute check-in, where's everybody at? And then throughout the week, checking in individually. Like for workers who are remote or isolated, a 10-minute check-in once a week from your leader where you're not getting more work or additional or a complaint about work, where you leave it up to the worker to decide what that conversation's about. So it could be about the weather. It could be about what's going on at home. It could be about the work because that's what's their priority. So you can have a lot of strategies as a leader. But you were talking about values, if you want that trust, your actions and words need to align with those values. So we've got those values. And as an individual, the more of your day that you can align your actions and words with your values, the better your mental health is. So agree, get those shared values. For me, I get frustrated because I see those values charts. I see that in organizations. I love their values are great, but then they don't provide the systems where the workers can enact them. So it's like then you lose trust. And do not want to put the burden just on the leaders here. Like they sometimes don't get what they need resources and support wise to be able to enact the systems so that you can all align your values with your words and actions day to day. Like even bullying and harassment will be higher where there's excessive job demands, where people have to fight for resources and supports, where it's not the right resources and supports. Like even that where there isn't civility, where people aren't raising their issues respectfully. Like there's so many of those factors that can contribute. So leaders have such a burden, also such an opportunity if they can make sure, yes, we got those shared values, and then work out how to use the systems in the organization so that people at that individual level can also have those values. I worry because I see leaders taking on the workload because they see that there's so much for their workers. And then they don't have time to address the systems that are the reason that workload is becoming too much. So again, temporarily helping your team out for a day or a week, but leaders address the systems so that the workload flows appropriately, is paced out, that there's good recovery, we get the resources and supports we need.
Yeah.
And don't assume. I know leaders who have assumed, my workers would like, a particular training. And it's like, actually, no, that training didn't help me at all. That was just another demand in my day. If you asked me, I would have told you I need accidental counsellor training or conflict resolution training or de-escalation training. Like consult, co-design with your individuals and teams to make sure you get the right resources and supports matching.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Co-designing, consultation, it's really it's really powerful when we sit together and have conversation. It's really because then you get to know what is it, where are we going? What is it that we need, as opposed to just put in resources because I think they are great, and we end up with issues, as you said, because that training just added and that meeting just added pressure into my day. And potentially all I needed to tell you was an update on where I am. I didn't need to sit in a 45-minute meeting. I'm not a great fan of meetings, you can tell. I'm like,
agree.
Yep. Let's get to it. Let's talk what we need to talk about, and then let's move on. You have been doing this work for a while, and I want to hear from you. What is one story from a psychological risk, psychological safety perspective that has either sat with you for the right or for the wrong reasons?
Probably some of the surprising outcomes for me is like how practical the resources and supports that workers ask for. They are not asking for ridiculous things. So to give you some examples of those, in one manufacturing organization, the leaders assumed it would be equitable to dictate rotating roster shift equal for everybody. So we share which production line they're on, we share which times of day they work, equally, right? But when they consulted with the workers had preferences. And actually they found that they could adjust to most of the preferences for most of the people, most of the time. They also encouraged those workers to raise their hand if at any point they were experiencing some musculoskeletal disorder, discomfort. And then they would stop that production line because they said if even one person is struggling, it's probably better everybody stops as a 5-10 minute break, and we'll teach you certain exercises for that production line to restore your body. They saw productivity improve across all production lines. They saw mental health stigma reduce across the entire organisation. They saw a 95% reduction in repetitive strain injuries. So that's where managing psychosocial factors can work in manufacturing. I've then seen in a local childcare centre here in Australia where it was post bushfires, post-COVID pandemic, then they had floods, then they had cost of living crisis, financial crisis, in this regional area where there's a lack of resource support. And this absolutely wonderful leader was so concerned about the exhaustion she was seeing in her workers. So we did a couple of things. We consulted with the workers, but we came with ideas like language. She kept saying overstaffing. And I'm like, overstaffing isn't a word anymore since COVID. That's just staffing. You just actually have to overstaff because there was just lack of staffing. Yeah, so let's just say staffing, no more of that. Let's talk about the types of job demands. They were trying to do a lot of extra things to stay connected with the community, to be in touch. Let's just be clear. Let's pick the one or two we think are working the best. Sometimes you got to stop doing things, stop doing process, stop doing systems, stop, like withdraw, reduce. Okay, so let's do that. Then they encouraged like some walking meetings and things. They all agreed that their 2-hour weekly or fortnightly staff meeting was not productive. Instead, the leader would do a check-in with the team at the start of the shift. Okay, these are our priorities. These are our job demands. Here's what we've got enough staff. These are the kids coming. This is what we want to prioritize today. At the end of the day, and they would say, on the days that we're fully staffed, do all the admin, do your professional development. When we're not always fully staffed, reduce the professional development. If we don't have enough staff, you don't even have to do admin that day. Just prioritize the care for the kids. And then at the end of the day, as they're leaving, she could see that they would be ruminating on what they didn't get done. And she'd be like, let's third space, let's reframe. You prioritize what we agreed to and you achieve that really well. I saw what you did for that kid. That was great. These other things we didn't have time for. On another day, we'll set time for that. Let's don't worry about that for another day. They saw a huge change. The staff exhaustion decreased. Staff were coming up with better ideas for how to streamline things because they had space to think proactively again. They actually were mentioned in their regional newsletter as a shining light in this area for mental health because how that then was role model for the community. I had their people trying to find me when I was having coaching with their leader, but just to let you know, things have been so good. They were just so excited. And nobody had any bad intent there, but slowly it had crept in, not managing those factors, impacting health, impacting engagement. They had to get clearer language, understanding, shared agreement, and consultation again can really help support create that change.
Amazing. So you hold a lot of stories of harm, psychological harm, burnout, and all these things. How do you stay grounded? How do you protect yourself?
The benefits of the education and then me practicing what I read. So having a balance in your life, in your domains. I have seen another recent concern, the topic of work addiction, where you do get an endorphin, from completing a task at a high pace. If you've got a high pressure, your body will release a bit of adrenaline, gets sharp, and then you achieve it, you get an endorphin. You're not meant to stay in that zone, in that high adrenaline zone. And if work is your main source of endorphin, that generally doesn't tend to lead to good health outcomes over time. So I know that providing balance in my domains and remembering what works for one person might not work for another and what works for one person might not keep working for them. I've had to change what helps rejuvenate me. Before I had kids, I was so social. I could go out all day, every day, and that would rejuvenate me and I'd be great for work. Now my kids are my social and exhaust me. So a little bit of quiet time and giving myself that. I know I need that. I also do frequent breaks throughout the day. I know that if I've been working cognitively for 30, 45 minutes, if it's hitting an hour, I know I need to do a micro break for my unconscious to download, my frontal lobe to stay cool, then I'll problem solve better throughout the day and have a bit of energy when I go home. I also do a little ritual at the end of the day where, first of all, I tell myself what I did well because I'm the boss. So good job. Well done, Tessa. And then I dot point down because writing can be therapeutic and also helps you feel like you've remembered, but I no longer have to hold on to it. I dot point down in handwriting, not even on a, spreadsheet or anything like that, not even on one of those systems, good old pen and paper, what I want to still achieve for tomorrow. So now it's the piece of paper's problem. It's my to-do list for tomorrow. And then I let that go. I put my laptop into sleep. I close my door. And that's my third space. I'm now moving into where I show up for my family, where I show up for my friends, where I show up for myself. And then I reinvest in those positive connections. I do things like, whether it's learning a new skill as well to keep challenging my brain, music, instruments, find those positive connections. Works good if you can get them at work too. I won't stop you. That's a bonus. But find the balance in your life of where those positive connections are building up good mental health. It's physical health takes exercise and effort. And if you want to get stronger, you actually have to work out. Good mental health takes effort. You cannot just lay on the couch and watch Netflix. You can do that for a bit of recovery, temporary recovery, or maybe sometimes for a bit longer recovery. But you actually do then need to get off the couch and invest in positive connections or watch with somebody for a bit. But yeah, keep finding what works for you and make sure you've got some energy left from every day at work so you can go invest in those positive connections, take care of yourself, and then you can show up at work productive and well.
That is so true. And I love that. And I potentially, as a coach, as a student of psychology myself, I know some of these things, but I tell you what.
We're to practice what we preach. You got to roll with it.
I tell you what, sometimes it's quite a struggle. Sometimes I'm really good. And other times I'm like, and that adrenaline for work, I just have got to get this going.
I mean, that's what it's there for. And you're meant to be able to use that sometimes temporarily, but then not all the time. And if you're doing it a bit much, give yourself that recovery. So being mindful, being aware, utilize it. But yeah, if you do it all the time, then that system, it starts, having some different, it can actually change you and change your body. And then it affects your ability to concentrate. It can affect your memory. So you can use that system, but like with so many things, you need balance. Use it too much. And then it becomes more stressful to even recover. So
that is true. God's guides are orbs. Yeah.
They grieve you. They bring you back to reality, don't they? They don't let you get away with it.
That is so true. So Dr. Tessa, if somebody is looking for you and wanting to have this conversation, because it's just been amazing, I'm just mindful of your time. I'd actually love to do another one of these. I had so many questions. If somebody is looking for you, where would they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at the Opus Centre, www.opuscentre.com.au, because I'm based in Australia. And I've just become part of a global psychosocial safety network with a bunch of other incredible, experienced people who we're all trying to learn how to do this best practice in workplaces around the world. So any of those places, get in touch. And absolutely, I love talking about this stuff. And these questions have been fantastic. This discussion, I could do this too, keep going, but let's do another one again soon.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for bringing both science and soul to the conversation. I am really appreciative, and I hope that our leaders that are listening to us will take some very practical key tools that we can go and make our workplaces safe, where people can really thrive when they're in it. And to our listener, if this was of any benefit, make sure you share it and make sure you get in touch with Tess. Follow her up. She's on LinkedIn too. She forgot to say that. Follow her work. She's doing some amazing work, and also just being able to delve into her PhD work. That was quite informative for me, just to see that side of oh my God, the word has gone now. We just talked about that. That's so hard because
it's well done. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anastasia. And thank you, listeners. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.